Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. How will Anthony Joshua fight in his next fight? I've seen a lot of talk online recently, following his win over Andy Ruiz Jr., that the performance, the manner in which he fought safety first, taking very few risks, was an aberration. That against an opponent such as Kubrat Pulev, it'll be a resumption of normal play, that Anthony Joshua will come out, be aggressive, take Pulev out, get a stunning knockout, and be aggressive pretty much from start to finish. But is that going to be the case? Because I'm not so sure. I think we're more likely to see a hybrid style from Anthony Joshua going forward. And I'll come to that in a moment, but I just wanted to touch on some comments from Carl Froch and Dillian Whyte, who've weighed in on Anthony Joshua and given their perspective about what they would like to see in his next fight. And in Whyte's case, he said that Anthony Joshua may never be the same sort of fighter as he was prior to the knockout loss to Andy Ruiz Jr. June 1st, 2019. So we'll start with Carl Froch though. So if the opponent is Kubrat Pulev, and expected to be, he says, I would like to see AJ box and move against Pulev. I want to see a finish at some point, whether it's mid to late or even in the last round. I want to see Joshua stand in front of him and let the shots go. End the fight aggressively and try to really finish Pulev off. That shows me he's not concerned about engaging following the loss to Andy Ruiz Jr. I want to see a bit of aggression, a boxing masterclass with a finish. So that's Carl Froch there talking to Sky Sports. And Dillian Whyte, he said, we've seen this before. Lennox Lewis was an aggressive fighter on the front foot, but got knocked out by Hazim Rahman and then changed his style. People forget Vladimir Klitschko was one of the most aggressive heavyweights for a long time, but he got done by Ross Purity, Corey Sanders and Lamont Brewster and changed his style. Joshua will do the same. Tall heavyweights start their careers very aggressively, but then even Deontay Wilder, when he was clocked a couple of times by Luis Ortiz, thought, I'm just going to wait. We've seen this time and time again in history, and it's always the same. Let's go further back. Takam, Povetkin, Joseph Parker, there were signs of caginess and not getting hit. Dillian Whyte's comments there on Anthony Joshua, and that last part, he was talking about Joshua's fights against Carlos Takam, Alexander Povetkin and Joseph Parker, all of which who he beat. But like he says, there were signs of caginess. So picking up on these comments from Froch and also Whyte, I think there is something to take from both of this, because I think we've already seen the transition from that Ruiz Jr. fight, that Joshua is going to tailor his strategy for all opponents going forward, as opposed to, a certain style that he had, which he liked to sort of fight from the mid-range. He liked to get into a tear-up at times. He would take chances. I think we are going to see less of that going forward. But that doesn't mean that he can't be aggressive, and it doesn't mean he can't be an exciting fighter to some extent. I think a lot of people forget that knockouts paper over the cracks and deficiencies of a fighter, and even potentially the way that a fight sort of panned out. And I think a good example of that, the most recent fight from Deontay Wilder against Luis Ortiz, very measured performance. Didn't throw a lot of punches, waited for an opening, and then took Luis Ortiz out with a 7th round stoppage. And that sniper-like finish against Luis Ortiz. A lot of people forget that before that, very low volume, not exactly a hugely exciting fight. It was intriguing because of the sort of chess match between the two, but it wasn't some sort of, stand in the middle and trade some sort of war. And often people forget about the way that a fight panned out, and the finish is all that they can remember. And when you close the show in style like Deontay Wilder did in that fight, for example, and many others, the Gerald Washington fight, very similar sort of performance, very cagey, not a lot of volume, and ultimately gets a good stoppage in the 5th round there. People forget that winning is winning, but a knockout, it is often what people remember, not the entirety of the fight. People come away with that was a really good finish, I really enjoyed that. And it does paper over, how a performance may have played out in a fight. So I think, for Joshua going forward, he has to weigh some of this up, because obviously against Andy Ruiz Jr., very measured performance. He showed people he could box on the back foot. He didn't engage, hugely throughout the fight, but he did enough to win and get a comfortable points decision. He used his height and his reach to full effect. something Vladimir Klitschko did very well, building up a big streak through the 2010s to 2015 when he was finally beaten. He used a safety-first strategy, but I think Joshua, in the context of his next part of his career, he will be cognizant that he can't be too safe. So I think there's going to be a bit of a hybrid style, and I think Dillian Whyte is right that Joshua, after the defeat, has made changes. He won't necessarily be the same sort of aggressive fighter, but do expect if the opportunities present themselves, he gets a man hurt, that he will try to finish them in style. And some of that is going to keep, helping his marketability going forward. You've seen Deontay Wilder being outboxed in a number of recent fights, but still coming home with a big knockout. And really, he's known as one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. Maybe not one of the technically best in the division, not necessarily winning a lot of rounds in his fights, but getting the job done. And that sort of finish, Joshua, I'm sure, is going to be well aware of. So potentially it could be a chess match with Kubrat Pulev for as long as it lasts. It could go deep into a fight. I don't think Joshua's going to come out sort of charging him, but he will be wary of the Bulgarian. I'm sure that Kubrat Pulev has seen something in Anthony Joshua from the Ruiz fight and potentially others that he thinks he can exploit. And remember, Pulev did buzz Vladimir Klitschko with the jab. So he does have good tools, and against a guy like Anthony Joshua, basically the same height, it's going to be a good boxing match. And I don't think Joshua is just going to come out charging like some people expect. Some people seem to think that Joshua's just going to walk through him. I think it will be a case that he may knock him out, but he's probably going to have to break him down before that. So that could be the case where you see half a dozen rounds of safety-first style fighting before Joshua comes through and delivers a knockout, as Carl Froch was talking about, where he does see the opening, the finish, takes it. And that will be what most people remember from that fight, a stunning knockout, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he does perform in his next fight, but I do think this next stage of his career, Joshua will be more cagey. We will see more of the Ruiz-style fighting in terms of safety first, fewer risks. He will be, aware of his deficiencies and being trying to minimize them while boxing the percentages. And that's something that Kubrat Pulev does very well, for example. So it could be a very cagey chess match, and then all of a sudden it's on and a knockout occurs. So I'm not expecting a pre-Andy Ruiz Jr. style of Joshua who does gamble. I think he will be smarter in the next phase of his career. How about you? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.